This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars with 2 back-to-back double headers on October 13th and October 20th. October 13th at 12:30 p.m., Scaling Solutions for the Child Care Crisis, Technology and Shared Services. October 13th at 3 p.m., Telenovela as Teacher, Innovations with Univision, Too Small to Fail and Literacy Partners. October 20th at 12:30, as part of our Funder to Funder series, we invite funders to join us for Global and National and Still Local, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Washington State. And October 20th at 3 p.m., Transforming Wellbeing Through Social and Emotional Development, sponsored by our partners at Promise Venture Funds. This is the 3rd installment in the Show and Tell series for the GLR Network. We will be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. And joining you now is Yoli Flores, Chief Learning Officer for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and welcome. Thank you all of you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, How Early Childhood Educators Build Bridges with K-3 Teachers and Parents. We are incredibly delighted and honored to have the Educare Learning Network as a co-sponsor of this learning conversation. Today's webinar continues our Learning Loss Recovery series, which many of you know we launched in April in response to the pandemic. Since then, we've delved into a myriad of issues impacting children's learning in the early years and in the early grades. Our goal is to equip and support the GLR network of local communities and local funders and all our partners with knowledge, with insights, practices, tools, and resources that can help us mobilize around slowing, stopping, and reversing learning loss. This will continue to be our top priority at the campaign, along with the focus on supporting parent success and early school success for children from low-income families. So we're truly grateful that you're joining us to be part of this mobilization effort. Today, we turn our attention to the work of early childhood professionals and the role that they are playing to inform and equip K-3 educators and parents around early childhood development as an important and critical foundation for learning, and how, with that understanding, we can and must build a stronger bridge between the early years and the early grades. This connection has always mattered, but it matters even more in this time of COVID, as many children are learning at home, and as parents and teachers on both sides of the bridge are working to strengthen their engagement and communication to mitigate learning loss for young children. So I'm excited about the conversation. Without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce and welcome our co-sponsor from the Educare Learning Network, Cynthia Jackson, who will moderate and lead this conversation. Just a little bit about Cynthia. For those of you who want to know what Cynthia's mission in life is, she is dedicated to producing high quality early learning that achieves positive outcomes for all children and their parents. She's the executive director of the Educare Learning Network and senior vice president at Start Early, formerly known as the Ounce of Prevention. There, she leads a generative coast-to-coast network of high-quality birth to 5 schools that function as innovative learning hubs for the field of early childhood education. So Cynthia, welcome. Thank you for being our moderator. I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you so much. We are truly delighted to be a part of the Tuesday Learning series with Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And I just want to spend just a minute or so to just share with you guys the mission, the vision of the Educare Learning Network, and a few details. And so the Educare Learning Network's vision statement is that we will demonstrate that research-based early childhood education prevents the persistent achievement gap for our nation's most at-risk young children, and that we use that evidence, practice, expertise, and the dynamic partnerships. Educare is a partnership between public and private to help ensure that all children and families, especially those at greatest risk, will have access to effective early learning, and that the first 5 years will be an integral part of the nation's education system. So again, we're so grateful to have this conversation today about the bridge between early learning and the K through 12 environment, specifically K through 3rd grade. You can go to the next slide. We are a coast-to-coast network located in urban, suburban, and rural communities across the country. We're in 15 states, Washington, D.C., and on tribal land with the tribe of in Winnebago. Next slide. This I wanted to just share with you guys is the hallmark of the Educare Learning Network. Many folks think that Educare is just a network of high quality birth to 5 early learning centers. And actually we have a bigger vision, which is to use the integration and intersection of what we know about best practices in early childhood in the program and practice space, actually using research and evaluation to inform what we do on the ground, and then use that information to advocate and move forward policies that support children and families in the birth to 5 space. We also have a logic model for how we are hoping to improve outcomes for both children and families. And so this next slide shows you our logic model, which begins with 4 core features of the model, which are data utilization, embedded professional development, high quality teaching and learning, and intensive family engagement that are embedded within strong leadership and community linkages, knowing that no one can do this all by themselves. And with that, you will produce strong parent-child relationships, school-family partnerships, and parent support for learning, which again, the final outcome is that we will have improved child and family outcomes. So that's just a little bit about the Educare Learning Network overall. And again, I wanted to just say, this is such an important time that we think about the bridge and the integration between what's happening in early learning, in the pre-K and the 0 to 5 space, and then what actually is happening in those primary grades, K through 3rd. I know that primary grade language might be kind of an old terminology, but I've been around a while. All right, so we want to move forward, and I would like to introduce today's panel. Our first panelist is Maria Harris. She's the principal for Educare Los Angeles at Long Beach, which is an early childhood education school that leverages federal, state, and private dollars to offer high quality early childhood education, again, to prevent the achievement gap. Educare ensures that children are prepared academically, socially, and emotionally for kindergarten. This is done by offering daily intensive family engagement along with high quality teaching and learning practices to ensure children, families, and communities thrive. Our next panelist today will be Ryan Lee James, who is the director of the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy at the Atlanta Speech School. Ryan is responsible for working collaboratively with community-based organizations and key stakeholders to impact language and literacy achievement for our most vulnerable children. Before joining the team at the Atlanta Speech School, Dr. Lee James had the privilege of training and mentoring graduate-level language pathologists as a member of the Communication Sciences and Disorders faculty at Adelphi University in New York. Our third panelist is Dr. Calvin Moore, who has over 30 years of experience in early care and education, working at the local, state, and federal level. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Council for Professional Recognition, home of the Child Development Associate Credential, the CDA. Dr. Moore is the first Chief Executive Officer of the Council to actually hold a CDA. So with that introduction of our panelists, I would like to start with Calvin. talking about building child development competencies in the early years and early grades. So welcome, Calvin.
Thanks, Cynthia. Glad to be with you. Also glad to be here with Maria Harris and Dr. Lee James.
All right. So we've got a little audio.
My name is Calvin Moore, and I am the CEO of the Council for Professional Recognition.
Uh-oh, Calvin, looks like, I don't know if it's me or it's you that's having a little difficulty. Wait, here we go to the next slide.
I think it's Calvin's.
Okay, I think he's okay now.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Sorry about that, Cynthia.
So Dr. Moore, no problem. Let's start with a little bit of background on the Council of Professional Recognition, and tell us about the organization and who it serves.
So the mission of the Council for Professional Recognition is to promote the improved performance and recognition of early childhood professionals who work with young children birth to age 5. And I think that's really the topic that we're talking about, can learn from the early childhood professional.
Excellent. And at the core of your work and the early childhood field overall, or as a whole, is the deep understanding of child development. What are the essential competencies that early childhood educators must demonstrate and which are core to ensuring that we prepare young children for success?
Calvin, before you start, let me suggest you turn off your video. That might help with the sound.
So, Cynthia is someone advancing the slides for most advancing.
Yes, next slide, please. There we go.
All right.
And
all right, thank you, Cynthia.
Better.
So
the sound is better, Calvin, once you turn that off. So thank you for doing that for us.
Oh, you're welcome. So one of the main missions at the council is to recognize professionals, and we sort of oversee the credentialing process for the most widely recognized credential in our field, the Child Development Associate credential. To date, we have credentialed over 800,000 CDAs across the United States and indeed the world, and we credential 40,000 credentials each year. And so you could see that the candidate who receives our credential must complete an assessment process, demonstrate that they're able to put their knowledge that they learned through the education process into practice in their daily lives with young children and families, and then they're awarded the credential which says they're qualified to be a lead teacher in the classroom. And to that end, we believe that the council is overseeing a process that ensures that those competencies are alive and well in the lives of teachers and in the lives of children and in the lives of the families that they serve. And so we actually believe that the CDA is the best first step
Okay, looks like we're having a little bit of audio trouble here.
in making sure that the needs of young children.
Cynthia, I wonder if we should pause and have Calvin call in and then come back to him.
Yes, that might be good. Let's see.
I'll send him a note.
All right. Sounds great. So to not delay us, we are going to pause on Calvin, Dr. Moore, and then we're going to move to our second panelist, which is Maria Harris from Educare of Los Angeles at Long Beach. And Maria, you know, we're connected as part of this Educare Learning Network. And so I want to just touch base with you on, you know, what happens on the ground and in the community from the Educare standpoint. And you're leading Educare Los Angeles at Long Beach. So please give us an overview of your school and the families that you serve. And you have to come off of mute, Maria. It's okay.
I apologize for that.
It's fine.
And thank you for inviting me to this conversation. Yes, a little overview of our school. Educare Los Angeles at Long Beach is one of the 25 schools in the National Educare Learning Network. We reopened in July, so our kids were back, and we have both the in-person sessions and virtual learning, so that continues, and we're providing comprehensive services to 182 families and students ages birth to 5. We are located in Southern California and serve the communities of North Long Beach, which is 65% socioeconomically disadvantaged, with ethnic backgrounds of 20% African American and 70% Latino population, and ELLs, English language learners. So just a little bit of what we do. Given my background as a former elementary school principal and the fact that we are embedded in the Barton Elementary School and the Carmelitos housing projects, one of our main goals has been to support a seamless transition from early learning to the early grades. So the way we do this is by partnering with our neighborhood elementary schools. And this partnership with the elementary schools has led us to work collectively with the leadership at the schools, with the teacher staffs, and we're just learning from one another. And what we're looking for is alignment, understanding of each other's practices, and just ensuring that our kids have a lifelong success, our families and kids together. The second thing that we're focusing on is intensive family engagement. We value the partnership between the school and the family, and we value engagement. We understand that this partnership is possible because we understand that the parent is the child's primary nurturer, educator and advocate. And the parent is learning to navigate the systems and to ensure that their child has the best. So we want to walk along with them in that journey. And then the last thing is the embedded professional development and reflective practice. So professional development is not only an expectation, but a necessity. If we hope to implement and sustain quality programming that engages parents, we must continue to offer very strong embedded professional development, and then share this with our elementary partners because they want to learn as well. And they want to learn and reflect, and they also want to share with us what they're doing. So overall, we're learning together and we're understanding child development in the context of the family unit. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so in our next slide, I'll share on our elementary and Educare collaborative. So this work started with the administrators coming together to strategize a vision to collaborate in support for students and realizing that we could leverage our resources and we can work together. So what we have is an open dialogue. We come together, the two staffs come together, and we meet and we discuss classroom walkthrough. So we visit each other's classrooms. And before that, we have just a conversation about what we're looking for and what's going to be unique about those classrooms when we're walking in. So we're discussing practices and bringing back highlights and opportunities for growth from both the elementary visiting our classrooms and our staff visiting the classroom. And then we also debrief, and we have collaborative reflective practices where we're asking questions like the ones that are listed there. How are students and families supported when they leave us to go to kinder? What are the developmentally appropriate practices in the different levels? And how are we all ensuring their families and students retain success beyond the years with us? So we always bring it back to the conversation on child success in the context of the family unit. And we can go to
I think Cynthia dropped off, so I'm going to step in for her as moderator, Maria.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you the next question, which you started to touch on in terms of parents. As we were preparing for this webinar, you reminded us that one of the most important stakeholders is the parent. So maybe you could just say more about your approach in terms of the relationship with parents. What are they learning from you about child development, and how does this knowledge impact the outcomes that both Educare and then the K-3 program are looking for mutually?
Sure. So we are in the journey of learning and practicing intensive family engagement and have implemented several approaches to build those lasting relationships with our families. This year, we're realizing that we have to get more and more and more creative to continue to engage our families, because everything is turning into a virtual connection. So how do we continue to grow those relationships in light of the virtual connections? So what used to be is now becoming connecting with them, right? And how to engage them. We used to have our monthly classroom meetings. Well, now they're virtual monthly classroom meetings, and we're just taking turns with our classrooms, and they're connecting with our families through Zoom meetings and really getting the parents to join in. And we're realizing that a lot more parents are actually joining than before, because they're in the safe space, they're in the comfort of their home, and they don't have to drive somewhere. So we do have them join us. And so we have the teachers showing them their child's classroom, sharing on child development practices, and giving them tips on family activities and a lot of tips on activities for mental wellness. Another strategy or activity that we use is the home visits. Our home visits have always been key to establishing positive relationships between the school and the family. The staff would go out to the home and meet the family even before the child stepped into the classroom. Well, those are now virtually. And we're sharing about that experience with our elementary partners, because that's something that they can do, and it could be easily accessible to them. So our families are now connecting through that Zoom meetings and providing an introduction of everyone in their family, and then giving us insights into their home life. All of this is happening virtually. And so in turn, our staff is sharing about themselves, sharing the classrooms, showing their classroom schedules, and just those positive bonds are continuing to be developed. And in turn, those will be those positive outcomes that we're looking for. Daily contacts, we continue with our families. That's done through our family support staff, and they facilitate the sharing of resources, which is something that our family really need right now, a lot of resources. Our coffee chats are also part of our continual activities that we have with our families. We're realizing that our families are going through a lot of challenges with finances, job loss, having children at home all day, and other factors. So those virtual coffee chats for reflective parenting and resource sharing. There's a lot of resource sharing that's happening at that time. So again, all these practices are taking place, but we're also going beyond our walls. We're sharing with our elementary partners as they seek to create similar environments for families. And then we continue the dialogue with them on how we're each learning together, what's working for families, what's not working for families, and just how we're all providing experiences that will lead to those positive outcomes in the end.
Thanks, Maria. I want to add a question that you probably didn't anticipate, because I didn't tell you I was going to ask you, but just as you're talking about the importance of both child development and building the bridge between the early years and the early grades, what is transformational how do you describe the transformation that happens when you both focus on the parent and really equipping and supporting and building up their knowledge around child development, but also that K1, 2, 3 teacher. Like what is the transformation that you see about then how we as the adults are engaging children, both in the early years, but especially as they transition into the early grades?
Yeah, one of the things that we have found in the open dialogues with our elementary early grades is just the learning that's taking place with the staff. They're working so hard and they're so dedicated. And I remember being in the hallway with my kinder and first grade teams thinking, what else can we do? I think they're realizing the importance of the families and the key role that they play in their child's learning, and how they can have a parallel journey with them in their child's learning, and then in turn help them advocate for their child. So I think those have all been like big ahas for that for the team that we're working with, is being open and being and doing a little bit more around family engagement. That has been transformational in them seeing what it could look like.
And what has changed in terms of the interaction between the adult and the child once there is that understanding, deep understanding of child development, about developmental milestones? What happens in that adult-child interaction that's different?
Oh, a deeper understanding of where they need to be and where they're at and who they are, and their families and their lives, and knowing that you care, that you deeply care for them and for their families, and that you were there from the start with them, so that when there are critical conversations or conversations about the next steps or interventions, that the child knows that as educators, we know the family, we know their whole family, and we know that they care, and that makes a big difference.
Well, just in time, because I see Cynthia coming right back with us. I'm sorry we lost you for a moment. I stepped in for you, Cynthia. And you're just now connecting to audio, so it'll take a second. I'm gonna hand this back to you as soon as you're back on, Cynthia, and I believe Kelvin is back with us, so we could step right back in and bring Kelvin back. And there you are, just get yourself up mute and then you're ready to go.
All right, I'm back.
Wonderful.
All right, so I'm not sure, you have to pop me into where we actually are, Yoli, at this particular point. Are we going back to Calvin?
Let's go back. Kelvin, are you back with us? I see his mute sign on, so maybe if he unmutes, there we go.
Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. So Sierra, if you could take us back to Kelvin's slide, and we'll just pick up where we left off. I believe Kelvin was talking to us about the competencies. So the next slide after this one, I think, Sierra. One more. There we go.
There we are.
Yeah, it seems like we're having all kinds of difficulties, right?
Yes, we are, but we will barrel through and it will be just fine, Calvin. So I hope our audience who's joining us today are bearing with us. This is just the new age that we're in, everyone. So Calvin, thank you so much for joining back in. And, I think it's, really important that we pause and really think about like how those competencies really are important goals here, but also how they bridge over into the K through third grade space as well.
I think that's right, because the space that the council occupies is really teacher preparation, right? And making sure that teachers are properly prepared to do the jobs that they need to do with young children. And these core set of competencies are our way of ensuring that teachers know what they're doing and can demonstrate that in the class.
Kelvin, we're losing you again.
And as you can see, for our conversation today around building bridges. I think our goal number 4, 5, and 6 are really essential to establish positive and run purposeful program, and then to maintain a commitment to help us.
All right, looks like we're struggling again, Calvin, with the sound. You're in and out again. Let's see if we can get your voice back in here, and if we can't.
Yeah, I think let's go to Ryan, Cynthia. Let's move on to Ryan, and I'll give Calvin a call and see if I can mitigate some of the challenges that we're having.
Okay, so fantastic. And we'll give Ryan a minute to unmute and come on screen if she's not already unmuted. And we are, as I introduced Ryan earlier, she's with the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. And so let's start, Ryan, with having you share more about the Rollins Center, the Cox campus, and the Atlanta Speech School.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Cynthia, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly, Ryan.
Okay, great. So I've got my volume up, and we're just going to pray that this thing keeps running.
All right. I'm with you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Ryan Lee James. I am the director of the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy.
Hey there.
The Rollins. Uh-oh.
Okay, Calvin, we put you on pause again, and we're going to barrel through and go with Ryan, and then we'll try to come back to you again.
Okay, so I called into that phone number. But you couldn't hear me when I was talking into the.
We can hear you really clearly now.
That phone number that you gave me, if you could actually hear me.
Yeah, we can, but it's still a little
Well, that's
choppy.
why I started talking back.
No problem, but we're gonna pause you again if you don't mind, and we're gonna let Ryan keep going. We just started with Ryan. And your connection is still a little choppy, and I'm hopeful that mine won't fall out on me again or disconnect, if that's okay with you, Calvin. Okay, Ryan.
So I am the director of the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. The Rollins Center is a program of the Atlanta Speech School. And I'll just give you guys a little bit of background on the Atlanta Speech School so that this all makes sense. Because people often say, are you with the Atlanta Speech School? Are you with the Rollins Center? Are you with the Cox campus? So I'll just give a little bit of context there. The Atlanta Speech School is in Atlanta and has been around since 1938. The Atlanta Speech School includes 6 departments overall, so we're housed all in one building in the Buckhead area of Atlanta. 4 of those departments are schools where we serve children in-house. So one school is our HAM Center, and a HAM Center serves children who have hearing loss. Another school is our Ward Law School for children who have diagnosed dyslexia. Our third school here is our Keenan Preschool, where we serve children who are typically developing, at least that is what we presume right now as they're still young. It's a preschool. And finally, Stepping Stones, which is a preschool for children who have speech and language delays. And so all of those 4 schools are in one building. We also have a speech, language, and audiology clinic where we serve the community in-house. And finally, the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. And the Rollins Center is really a place that started years ago for professional learning for educators. So we sort of synthesize all of best practices and the science around language and reading so that we can make that science and best practices accessible to teachers. More recently, we have shifted to be also focused on families. And this work with families has been going on for a while, but has really intensified since the onset of COVID, when we realized that it wasn't just enough to continue to serve teachers directly. We really needed to be serving families. And I just want to say we're so grateful for our partnership with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We worked with Ralph Smith and Ron Fairchild, and we're just grateful to be participating in this. So that's the Rollins Center and the Speech School, and our online Cox campus is how we make all this fantastic information accessible to families, teachers, school leaders, district leaders. And thankfully that we're grateful to our funders because we're able to provide all of that science for free via
well, that's just an important strategy, particularly right now with everything going online. So so happy to hear that you guys have that online offering as well. And Ryan, you bring such an important perspective to our work in terms of language development and the science behind learning to actually read. And before we get to the question about the bridge from early learning to the early grades, can you cover the basics about how young children acquire language and early literacy skills?
Sure. So that is a fantastic question. And I selected this slide to include because I thought it really displayed this continuum that the speech school is really after, the Rollins Center and all of our departments. So this slide sort of depicts the third trimester through literacy. And a lot of times we hear folks talk about the work as birth to third grade. But unfortunately, in our country, we know that even by third grade, so many of our most vulnerable children are not literate. And so we try not to think about third grade so much, but think about the continuum through literacy. Mm-hmm. And I'll just make a couple of quick notes here, Cynthia, based on your question. I am a speech language pathologist by training, so speech and language is my forte. But we know that very early on, the way that language develops for children in the birth to 5 space is in context. Yeah. In the context of their environment with their family, in the context of school. And so babies are hardwired, right, to learn language in sounds. Not necessarily, we don't necessarily sit down and teach children, okay, in English we have subject, verb, object, sentence structure, right? They pick up on these things implicitly in context. But what's critical in the birth to 5 space is that we're constantly talking to children, and there are best practices around what we suggest for teachers and families. And really this early foundation here is critical when kids move to that kindergarten through 3rd grade space. So often what we see of some children from different backgrounds is that a lot of the literature describes these kids as not being school ready. Well, what does that mean? It means that they're not coming to the table to kindergarten with these foundational skills, vocabulary breadth, vocabulary depth, an understanding of complex syntax through their language comprehension. And so all of these really early oral language skills in terms of speaking and listening are really the foundation for kindergarten through 3rd grade, and how teachers really need our babies to come in with those skills so they can start their explicit instruction of reading, which we know brains are not hardwired for. That takes explicit instruction in that space.
Yes. Excellent description, right? And I'm so glad that you have brought in the prenatal aspect of this work, particularly in the 3rd trimester, and all of the brain development. Then after that is such rapid growth and development. And one of the other pieces of this is, when we're thinking about just oral language and narrative, right? Like kids might have a lot of that, but that's not what we're actually measuring them on sometimes in school. So, it's important to have this kind of understanding of learning in context and what children actually show up with, when they hit kindergarten as well.
Because you're so right, Cynthia. We often talk about, we say that kids, based on a deficit model, we say that kids don't have a certain set of skills. And in fact, they do. Their skills just look a little different depending on how they've grown up. So they might not have all this academic vocabulary, but they've got tons of vocabulary that is relevant for their environment and communicating and thriving in their home environment from birth to 5. Another point I just want to make about this slide is that as children develop speech and language skills and they move into the kindergarten through third grade space, where ideally teachers are implementing explicit instruction, the National Reading Panel tells us what areas we need to focus on. The teachers are explicitly instructing around those areas. And what we see is that in early development, oral language drives reading.
Yes.
And then later development, reading really drives sophisticated oral language. The more kids are able to read, they have more access to these sophisticated vocabulary words, these complex syntactic structures that we don't use every day in our conversation, but they're building their bank of sophisticated language through access to written code. And it's one of the reasons why we really encourage that even in third grade and beyond, that teachers continue to read to their students.
Absolutely.
Because if you have difficulty accessing written text, eventually what that means is your speech and language skills stop growing because you can't access written text. But if your teachers are still reading to you and pouring into you, you're developing complex ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise had access to.
Absolutely. That's fantastic information to share. And the other important aspect that you bring to this work is around our most vulnerable children, including those with learning differences.
Yes.
What should the early childhood and the K-3 educators keep in mind as these children and child development and developmental milestones as we work to create, a stronger, more seamless bridge between the early years and the early grades?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did say that I'm a speech language pathologist by training. And one thing that is really critical is that our speech language pathologists are integrated into early childhood work, so that we're working with teachers early on, working with educators early on, so that bridge is really clearly defined and everybody understands what their role is. I should have, in hindsight, when I am thinking about this, I could have put up another visual, but I will try to paint the picture for everybody. That there is so much overlap when we think about language disorders, for example. We characterize language disorders in a lot of different ways, and many of those ways being a lack of comprehension or limited vocabulary, differing use in grammatical markers like dropping of past tense ed, and things that we see is really common in our English language learners or our non-standard dialect speakers. Okay. So what does this mean? There's all this overlap, right? That when kids come to school, sometimes teachers and professionals are faced with, oh gosh, this may look like a disorder or this may look like a disability. And so what's really critical for that we talk about a lot in speech language pathology is really the first step in understanding that there's all this overlap that exists, that for various different reasons, children come with different language skills. That does not constitute a language disorder, but it also doesn't rule it out, right? So we know that kids who have differences can also have a disorder. And what we see in the literature is that our kids from different backgrounds are actually underrepresented on speech language caseloads and learning disability caseloads. So what this means is that our kids are not being identified in those areas. Now, behavioral disorders is a different story, but in terms of language and reading, they're not being identified and they're not getting the services that they need. So it is a real challenge. Sure. So the first thing we want to ask teachers and families or teachers to do really is familiarize yourself with the population that you're working with. So I know Maria talked about how she is in an area with a concentrated population of English language learners. Right. If you do not have any familiarity with the family and the child's first language, you ought to become familiar, because you need to know the risk factors and the clinical indicators so that you're able to accurately spot or at least raise the red flag to say we think something might be going on. Because our early years is really important. Also, we want to focus with our families and our teachers on building strong language skills from the start. Regardless of what the child's first language is, it is much easier if we can get families and teachers thinking about that continuum. What does that vocabulary mean now? Well, it means the more you talk to your child now, the more you build their vocabulary, the more sound awareness they're getting. Yes. So when they get to Miss Jackson's class in kindergarten, they're like, oh gosh, I know all these sounds. Easier to make the letter sound correspondence, easier for decoding. So helping teachers and families really understand that continuum. And two other things, ongoing progress monitoring constantly. We should always be monitoring progress as the educators. And then finally, implementation of evidence-based interventions. Where is the evidence? Where do we know, or how do we know that something is working? We have to go to the literature, best practices, and say, what's best for this population? And so those are the key points that I want to touch on based on that question, Cynthia. And the last thing that or not the last thing, I don't know if I have another question, but I want to say this about the role of families and teachers, because I think it's so critical when we're working with vulnerable populations. One thing that we say at the Rollins Center is that our work is really focused on, so the speech school and all the schools in it are private schools. And they are expensive to attend for some families. And so what that means, and though we have scholarships, and from my understanding, we have never turned a child away because of their ability to pay, the reality is the speech school is only so big. So how can we get the word out with you guys and other organizations about evidence-based practices? So when we're thinking about the parents and the teachers' role with vulnerable populations, I think one thing that I just want to really drive home in this setting is that many of our vulnerable families, our vulnerable children come from vulnerable families. Yes. And so we have to be really considerate when we're working with families about what our expectations are. Not our expectations for the student, but a family only wants the best for their child. And if the child has lack of access, then mom, grandma, dad may have also had lack of access. And so we've got to be there as a support and as to build a bridge and to build relationships so that we're able to best serve that family, not blaming the family and not having these high expectations like, we always say in our field, you got to read to your child. And nobody ever thinks about whether mom or dad can read. Right. And so the importance is of oral storytelling to really be able to drive home and build those sophisticated language skills. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's critical. Mm-hmm. And I would just kick myself for not saying that in this forum, because so often we're I don't know if we're blaming the family, but we're not really partnering with them in the ways that like Maria described.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic information. And, I'm really worried and concerned about the lack of early identification, right? In the space, particularly, for language development, but other things as well. Excuse me. And, early identification leads to early intervention. So I think there's a piece for us to consider with that. We do have quite a few questions in the chat also, and I'm coughing now. Excuse me.
Yeah, let me just check. I think Kelvin is back with us. Kelvin, I see your phone number. Are you with us?
I am, and I've been enjoying the presentation. So thank Dr. Lee James for that wonderful presentation on early intervention.
And you sound great.
Yes, you do.
I think we can go back and try to come back to the competencies. We have 10 minutes, and so I think that was the time that we had for Kelvin's presentation. So I think we're good on time, Kelvin. Are you game?
Yeah, maybe the third time is a charm here.
All right. Let's give it a try.
All right, so I don't know that you can see the slides, but we have the competency standard slide up, Calvin. And you were talking about goal 4, 5, and 6 when we lost you.
And I can't see the slide. Can others see the slide?
I can see them.
Okay.
Well, I think the main thing about these competencies is that we believe at the council that these competencies represent the most important part of our work, and that's to make sure that early childhood professionals can demonstrate that they know what they're doing with young children. And we developed this system with that in mind, so that we can not only define what those core sets of competencies are, but actually recognize the skills needed to manage a program. And that's whether you're a center-based teacher, infant toddler teacher, preschool teacher, home visitor. And I think all of those things are important when you are talking about building bridges to the K-12 system, particularly kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. We really believe that the CDA is the best first step, and these core competencies around building knowledge about families, understanding how I can implement a purposeful program, which is what Dr. Lee James was talking about, and then also making sure that there is a commitment to the profession. And as a CDA holder myself, I think that's perhaps the best thing it did for me. Not only was I able to prove to my families and the other stakeholders in my program that I knew what I was doing in the classroom and that I was a competent caregiver, but also it allowed me to connect really deeply with my profession. So I learned those key essential child development milestones for the children that I was caring for, but I also became deeply connected to the early childhood field, earned my bachelor's degree, master's, and a PhD, but it was that CDA that set the foundation.
Yeah, that's fabulous, Calvin, and thanks so much. I'm so happy that you are able to rejoin this conversation. And I'm particularly interested that you brought in all of the different modalities, right? Like the center base, the home base, all of the different ways in which we are working with our early learning population, and the critical importance of the home-school connection, or the school and parent connection. Because again, we know that the parents are the ones that are going to continue to support the children's development throughout their trajectory, and that child's development just doesn't stop from one, discrete time period, like, birth to 5, and then, it's a continuum of child development. So thank you so much for bringing that in. And I also, really truly appreciate the CDA and the way that you're describing it as a commitment to the profession. And right now we are in a fight for our lives in the birth through 5 space, right? As our teacher, and the K through 12, as our teachers are essential to the learning of our children across this country right now, and particularly as we're challenged with the pandemic. So, Calvin, I don't know if you have anything, else you want to say here, since you were cut off so early, but we will go to questions and just bring the audience in, bring some of their questions in. And those of you all on the panel, Calvin, Maria, and Ryan, feel free to answer any of these questions that will be coming forward. So one question that has been posed is, young children look for faces when communicating. How are masks mandates disrupting this process? Excellent question. Ryan, I'm sure you can jump in on this one, but others, I think, please feel free to share what you're experiencing as well.
That's a great question. So I'll tell you what we've done at the speech school, because we recognize the importance of, especially our kids who have hearing loss, being able to see the mouth and read lips. We have started to use those big clear face shields that look like beekeeper hats, so kids can see the lips. It is a real concern, I think, and only time will tell what that's doing to development, especially when it comes to pragmatic development, just in terms of reading social cues without being able to see the full face, especially for a child who's developing and learning about social norms. I think we should certainly be concerned about that. When it comes to safety, you know, you're trying to keep people safe or kids safe from COVID. I think those clear masks, as long as they're safe, you know, you can't, what's the test? Like you light a lighter and if you can't blow that spark out, then it's supposed to be safe. So I think if we, you know, if there's any way for us to be using those clear masks when we're communicating with our students, also for our students in their communication with each other, is really helpful.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Maria, I don't know if you want to add anything here from, you know, what's happening in your location?
Yeah, well, we have very strict guidance from the health department on what our children should be wearing and staff. But of course, you can't keep a mask on a preschooler and even younger than that. So our teachers are using the face shields and they're encouraging and teaching kids to put on their mask, but they stay in the classroom all day. So they feel pretty safe in there and that they don't go to their classrooms. That is their school family in there. Our teachers, I think what's working the best is what we heard is a face shield for our teachers to use and communicate with children.
Great. So Calvin, we've got a question coming to you. CDAs as a first step, but how can that be implemented so every early childhood classroom has a CDA?
Well, that's really the essential question at the council. We believe that parents should be demanding the CDA because we know that it sets this foundational base of competence in working with young children. So we believe that parents are one of those key stakeholders that the more they learn about the CDA and its preparation of early childhood professionals, that they will begin to demand that early childhood professionals earn that credential. We also believe that this is something that's doable. So policymakers, both at the federal and state level, the more they learn about the CDA and how it is really accessible. I mean, we conduct assessments in 23 languages. So it really is accessible in many communities, no matter what first language the caregiver speaks and or the children. We really have tried to make the CDA really accessible to all of those communities based on their language, and also making sure that we have PDSs all over the country who can assess these candidates once they choose our credentials. So we believe that every early childhood professional should be able to earn it. And so it should be embedded within our higher ed system so that as you're learning to become a professional teacher, you get the CDA on the way.
Yes. So I want to just, Calvin, while we have you here still, I want to, I know that you have a couple of other slides in your presentation today. And I wondered, do you want us to go back to those or you want to just keep going the way we are right now?
Oh, I think we can keep going the way we are right now. I'm sure I could build, if I get to answer another question, I can build in some of those. But I think we're rocking and rolling, so let's just keep moving forward.
Okay, sounds good. So I have a question, pretty much policy related question. So anybody, you know, who wants to answer this can answer, and I'm going to grab the end of this question. So the end of the question is that, you know, we're talking about, we have a lot of stakeholders around the early learning, you know, K-3 environment. And we want to really think about, is there an opportunity to work towards, this just changed on me. Hold on, my question just floated away. Do we want to have an opportunity to work towards leveling the playing field so that every child has access to high quality early education? And how do we get states to invest in this particular way? So any work that you all are doing, particularly with states on investments from an advocacy and policy standpoint to increase investments, either at your local level, community, state, or your engagement with federal policy organizations?
Well, believe it or not, Cynthia, we have several entities interested in making critical investments during this time because, as you have said, the early childhood professional, perhaps for the first time, is viewed as an essential worker. And so, perspective, are making those critical investments, allowing funding to be funneled through to CDA training and helping candidates get their assessment done. So we are advocating for that. We are working with our state leaders to make sure that they know that this is doable at the state levels through CCDF funding and other federal funding streams. So yes, the more that we can have this sort of symphony of advocacy happening around the country, where early childhood professionals through their local membership associations or other kinds of networks are making sure that policymakers understand that these critical investments are more important now during the pandemic than they were just 8 months ago.
Absolutely. Ryan, Maria, anything on your end on this one, or?
Sure, I can add. So we have work around policy, and we have several policy partners. I think as school leaders, in my place as the school leader here, staying involved and communicating what's happening on the ground and the outcomes that we're getting with the work that we're doing, that always goes a long way. And staying involved with city, local advocacy work and policy work and county-wide. We get a lot of invitations to the policy work that's happening on the county and state level. And sometimes it could be overwhelming, but I love to share on what's happening. They don't know because they're focusing on the policy work. And so those folks need to know and hear on what's happening at the site and the outcomes, the positive outcomes that we're getting with families and with kids. Involvement, engagement.
Ryan, anything from your from the Rollins Center?
Well, so we have certainly, or we are in partnership with like the Department of Early Care and Learning here in Georgia, as well as the Georgia Department of Education, with various initiatives. And I think the question about how do we get folks to invest, our local, state, all our federal agencies to really invest in early childhood ed is through continuing to show this data that makes so much of a difference, that if children have quality early learning, our teachers in kindergarten through third grade are faced with fewer challenges in terms of helping kids get up to speed. And I think in our country now, I think it's the most recent NAEP data that shows about 18% of African-American kids, 21% of Latino kids that are reading on grade level. I mean, that data should be enough to implore our policy leaders to pay attention to what our communities are faced with. The science has been telling us for years that early learning matters. So I hope we can move to that place one day.
Yeah, and that is so important. And I think that using data, right, to provide the evidence for greater investment in early childhood has to be continuously lifted up and highlighted. And, when I, shared early on today about the Educare Learning Network and the platform that integrates practice and research and policy, right? That's our aim, to take what we're learning in the network, as well as with other high quality programs across the country, and using that to leverage, policy change. And there's, a couple of organizations, the Bipartisan Policy Center, Women's Law Center, First 5 Years Fund in DC, that are all moving, policy in this particular area for increased access, but not just access increase in the numbers, but of high quality, right? Access for many more children and families. So I really appreciate that question that was put in here, because we, the work that we do is not just on behalf of the, 150, 200, even 5,000 kids. It's for all children in America that really need access to high quality early learning settings. There's another question I think I want to, give to you as well, Ryan, and it's related to, do you think that non-identification stems from children not being tested until they are in kindergarten, and therefore they do not get supports in previous grades? I'll start with you. I'll go to Maria. And then, Calvin, if you want to round us out with anything on that question, don't feel obligated to do so. But yeah, I'd like for folks to just kind of think about that, since we have such a challenge of early identification and then really getting people to early intervention. So what's that all about, you guys?
Yeah, I think so. My initial response to that is yes. And when we think about our just assessment tools that I, for example, have access to as a speech language pathologist, they are not culturally and linguistically appropriate. And so that's a challenge that and who are they really appropriate for is the question. Upper middle class children, really. And so that is a huge challenge, that our clinicians don't have access to sensitive tools that will allow them to make appropriate decisions based on their students. Another major challenge in this space is that, and I saw this when I had my daughter, that our pediatricians don't really spend a whole lot of time asking about developmental milestones. It's like a checklist, but there is not a huge focus there. And when we think about early intervention in the birth to 3 years old space, the pediatrician is, in many cases, should be the first line of defense if the family doesn't know what to look for. So if our pediatricians aren't spending time with the family to say, okay, your baby's 12 months, have they started using words yet? And really helping families understand what the risk factors are, then families don't even know to advocate for early intervention. And so it's almost like it really is this lack of access across the board that we have to fix, so that our pediatricians are not, stacking appointments, 5 people booked at 3 o'clock, where they can't spend the time with the family helping to educate them, so that family can advocate. And then once that child gets to pre-K or kindergarten through 3rd grade, that our teachers and clinicians, our psychologists, SLPs, have access to sensitive instruments that will allow us to accurately identify students. We also, and the one other thing that I'll say in this space is that under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there is language in that policy that really makes it difficult for our children who are from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, linguistically diverse backgrounds, to be able to be diagnosed with, for example, dyslexia. The law as it stands says something like, if your language or reading differences can be attributed to SES or language differences, then you don't qualify for these services. I mean, it's just a huge challenge. So we're just assuming that if you speak Spanish as a first language, you can't have dyslexia. Why? Like, who said that? It's just because we don't know how to identify dyslexia in Spanish. That's our problem, not the child's. So I just think that it's deep, it's systemic, and we all have to really rebel against that.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's what advocacy is all about, right? It's a rebellion against what the status quo is and making changes where we know changes need to be made. So thank you for that very bold statement. Yes,
Cynthia, I would just add that I think Ryan is right about the assessment and the importance of that. But I also think it's about access, right? Because I think for early childhood professionals, early intervention is our bread and butter, because we see the children earlier than our colleagues in kindergarten. And so we know, we're trained, part of our competency is to look for those things that might be indicating that there are problems. And you all know, the earlier we intervene, the better. But you look at a program like Early Head Start, right, which is like the gold standard for early childhood professionals working with young children, infants and toddlers. What is it? Less than 10% of all eligible children are being served. And so whenever you have that fewer number of children being served by a program like Early Head Start, then you know you're missing those children. You know you're not doing as much as you should be by identifying those problems early. So it's about access as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, to that point, you know, Calvin, it is 10 to 11% of eligible children served in early Head Start and only 30% of eligible 3 to 5-year-olds that are being served. So we've
There
got
you
a lot
go.
of work
There you
to
go.
create that access
Hmm.
across the board. Like kindergarten, everyone goes to, right, first grade, second grade, third grade. But if you're not showing up with an early learning experience in that birth to 5, and I want to stress it's 0 to 3 and then 3 to 5, because learning starts at birth, right? Starts
There you
prenatal,
go.
Brian said. And so we've got a lot of emphasis around the pre-K space, but we also need to back them up and say, don't forget about our, you know, our newborn babies. Don't forget about the mom prenatally, and don't forget about that 0 to 3 space. So, you know, excellent points around, you know, the early intervention, early identification, but access, right, which is a key piece that we all need to be advocating for as well. Any other comments on that particular one? Because I do have a question. I want to also make sure, Calvin, that you have an opportunity to hear this. And this is from someone in New York State who's saying that they are aware that the CDA is presented through local state associated child care resource centers. And do you have an affiliation with departments of education in various states as well? So maybe just talk a little bit globally around, you know, your connections and relationships as the CDAs are offered, rolled out, and certified.
So that's the unique thing about the CDA. The participant is absolutely right that because CDA was really birthed as a community-based program, that most of the training programs were embedded in those community-based child care resource and referral agencies, providing the education and training that candidates would need to earn the 120 clock hours of training. But more and more, the numbers and the kinds of institutions that are offering the CDA training and education is increasing. We see higher eds getting involved, so you can earn your CDA at a local community college or a 4-year institution. I think that's happening more often than not. And we also see that in some cases, I'm not sure about New York, but we are seeing in some cases that departments of education are embracing the CDA and making sure that those paraprofessionals or parents who are interested in becoming educated and becoming part of the school system in their local school district, they are looking at the CDA as a foundational credential for those individuals as well. So it is growing, but it did start as a community-based effort at those local child care resource and referrals.
Great, excellent. All right. It's, I think we're winding down. We probably have about 15 more minutes here, maybe 10 minutes or so, but I would like to just offer an opportunity for, we're gonna close out the Q&A session right now, but an opportunity for any of the panelists, Maria, Ryan, or Calvin, any final thoughts about the discussion that we've had today, thinking about how early childhood educators build bridges with the K-3 teachers and parents. We had a lovely, you know, kind of thinking about where the role that parents and families play in this in our educational setting. So if you have any closing remarks, you can just take a minute for that. Any one of you guys can go first. We also, I want to point out to those who've joined us today, we have a partners poll, so we'd like to get a little bit of feedback from you. And then as we close out, I will turn it back over to Yoli. So Ryan, Calvin, or Maria, anybody want to closing remarks?
I can start. I just want to encourage everyone to keep working with your families. Keep them as the primary nurturer and educator for the children. Engage them and just stay involved with policy, stay involved with the elementary, keep bridging those topics with them, tap into the leadership of the school side and invite them to see and learn about child development and use the tools that you have to just keep working with them and collaborating and building collaborative settings for them to come and see your places and learn from each other. So just want to encourage everyone to keep doing that.
Great, thank you, Maria.
I can go next. I just want to add or close out by saying, I think it's really important in whatever organization you're in to, as Maria said, keep supporting our families. I think it's important that our families and our teachers really understand the relationship between early oral language skills, speaking and listening, and later reading, because I find that when early childhood teachers get that aha, oh gosh, so you mean all this vocabulary that I'm pouring in now is gonna help support later reading comprehension? Yes, that's right. And vice versa, you know, and having the later, our kindergarten through literacy folks thinking about if your child, about that continuum. So if your child comes in and is behind on sound awareness or behind on vocabulary, we've got to know how to reach back and still build those skills, even though we might consider them to not be within our scope. We can't just leave those children behind. And so having families and educators understand the continuum and the scope of development, so that risk factors, so that everyone understands the risk factors, and that we're throwing the red flag as soon as we can, because it's never too early to say, you know, at 8 months old or a year old, if your baby has not started producing any words, is not even close, just still cooing, no consonant sounds, red flag, even though the child is so young. Let's get on it early and really help advocate for our families so that their children are getting the services that they deserve early on, as early as we can.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And Calvin, last
I think for me, as I was preparing for this talk today, I was thinking about what makes the early childhood professional unique, right? And because it's not the content, right? The same knowledge and content that our kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teachers have to grapple with in their preparation, it's the same knowledge, same theory, same goals and objectives. I think it is what drives our practice. And I think what drives our practice in the early childhood arena is the developmental milestones of our children. And so that's why you see some of the differences in the two settings, right? There's less expulsion, less opportunities for expelling a child in our setting because we respect the developmental milestones, and that's what drives our practice. And so I think that's the unique part here that I'd like to bring forward, that if there's anything that the kindergarten teacher could learn from a CDA in a preschool setting, is that we are driven by the child development principles and milestones of the children we serve and the families that we're serving, right? And maybe that's what they could learn from us, be driven by what's developmentally appropriate for the children and families that you're serving.
That is excellent, Calvin, and I'm so glad that you brought up the issue around, behaviors of children and, expulsion and suspension. It was happening very broadly in the early childhood space as well. And it was something that, everybody kind of band together in the early childhood space and said, this is not appropriate to, kick kids out of, 2-year-olds out of early learning programs. And so there's still lots of work to do around that in thinking about what are those behaviors that I would say are challenging to adults. We call them challenging behaviors of children, but they're challenging us because it rocks our way of actually interacting with children when you have one child that, is going astray, right, in a classroom setting. So I just want to, I know we're wrapping up. I'm going to turn it over to Yoli. I really want to thank all of you all who have joined us today on this webinar. It's been a little technologically challenging, but we know in early childhood we are resilient. And so the panelists have done a fantastic job of having to log off and log back in and try to call in. And I think you just have done a spectacular job. I am so pleased to have been a part of this. And I just really want to thank Ryan, Maria, and Calvin for your information today. There's a couple other questions in there about podcasts. How can people learn more about what we talked about today? I would like to, Yoli, as I'm turning it over to you, I'd like to throw a challenge out there for us and for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which is, I'd love to see a panel of our K through third grade educators talk to us. So we've talked with them about what we do, and I think that would be a great another Tuesday learning if you guys could fit it in. So thank you all so much. And Yoli, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cynthia. And what a great idea. In fact, we had a funder to funder GLR week convening a few years ago where we had a panel, 4 on each side with the early years and the early grades. But it's time to bring that conversation back. I love the idea, and it's absolutely something that we will entertain. And before I say thank you to everybody, I just want to go back to Calvin, your last remark. I just so appreciate you raising the issue around suspensions and expulsions. And this was one of the issues that prompted Ralph to suggest that we have this conversation. Ralph Smith is our managing director at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And we just firmly believe that the field of early childhood education has so much to teach all of us, every adult, about how children grow and develop so that we are responsive to them in the way that they need in order for them to be successful. When I was on the school board in LA, I used to always say that the tail needed to wag the dog, that it was early childhood that needed to teach the K-12 system how to treat and engage and teach children. And so thank you to all of you for reinforcing that, for talking about the ways in which you each do that in your work, and about how that work today is more important than ever as we continue to build these bridges between the early years and the early grades. So with that, thank you, Dr. Cynthia Jackson, for serving as our moderator, for being a co-sponsor of this webinar. Thank you to Dr. Ryan Lee James. Thank you to Dr. Calvin Moore. Thank you to Maria Harris. You all were a phenomenal panel, and we are very, very grateful for the learning that you share with our network. And with that, Sierra, if you could put up the last slide. I'll just quickly share with you, which we shared at the very top of the hour, the upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays conversations that are coming up. Put these on your calendar. They're every Tuesday at 3 o'clock is a learning opportunity for all of us committed to making sure that more low-income children are achieving early school success. So next Tuesday on September 13, we have a funder to funder conversation. So if you're in philanthropy, if you're a funder, this is especially for you. The topic is around scaling solutions for the childcare crisis, which we've been talking about in some part today. And the focus around technology and shared services as a way to support the field. Also on that day, but at 3 o'clock, the first one was at 12:30 Eastern. So it's a double header next Tuesday. At 3 o'clock, part of our Learning Loss Recovery series, like today, is our next topic, which is around the work that Univision, Too Small to Fail, and Literacy Partners are doing to reach more families, more children, using the telenovela as teacher approach. So join us for that. The following week, September 20, again, we start with a funder to funder conversation at 12:30 Eastern. We'll focus on the global and national and still global focus by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Washington State. And then at 3 o'clock the same day on the 20th, one of our emerging model webinar series, Transforming the Wellbeing Transforming Wellbeing Through Social and Emotional Development. It's the third installment in a partnership with Promise Ventures, which we call Show and Tell. So we invite you to join us for that. And with that, I wish you all a great rest of your afternoon. Please be safe and please stay healthy. Take good care.